The air in our small dining room felt thick with tension as my mother's words sliced through it like a knife. "She has real potential, Lucia, but you have to see it's just sensible planning," she said, her voice steady, each syllable stacking another layer of distance between us. I sat at the worn oak table in our Fresno home, clutching a letter from MIT in my shaking hands. The bold logo stared back at me, an acceptance into their mechanical engineering program, a dream I'd chased with every late-night study session and robotics competition. It came with a scholarship covering half the tuition, a triumph I'd expected to celebrate. Instead, March 24, 2026, was turning into one of the most bitter days of my 18 years. "I've got half the tuition covered," I said, forcing my voice not to waver. "And my grades, they're better than Sophia's were when you sent her to UC Berkeley." My father, Javier, a civil engineer who'd clawed his way up from nothing, avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the chipped coffee mug in his hands. "It's not just grades, Mija," he muttered. "Sophia's studying architecture, a solid career. Engineering, mechanical stuff, it's risky. What if those jobs dry up or move to China?" I clenched my jaw. "They've been saying that forever, Dad. Meanwhile, robotics and automation are booming." My mother, Rosa, leaned forward, her hand brushing mine in a gesture that felt more rehearsed than warm. "We're not saying no college, Lucia. There's Fresno City College right here. You could transfer to Fresno State later. That's the smart choice for someone like you. Someone like me." As if my 4.2 GPA, state-level robotics awards, and near-perfect SAT score were somehow less than Sophia's B average in her stubborn resolve to follow Dad into architecture. "We can't stretch ourselves thin," Dad added, his tone final. "Sophia's education costs a lot already. It wouldn't be fair to the family." The family. That sacred unit they always invoked, except when it came to my ambitions. Then I was Lucia Morales, the spare, the practical one expected to settle. My name might as well have been stamped with second best. All I wanted was what Sophia got: a shot at a top school, parental support, a chance to chase my passion without breaking myself in the process. What stood in my way was their unshakable belief that Sophia's blueprints were worth more than my gears and circuits, their financial favoritism dressed up as logic, their narrow definition of success that couldn't stretch to include MIT slabs. That night, I retreated to my room, the MIT letter glowing under my desk lamp. Other acceptance letters, from schools I couldn't afford, lay scattered like fallen leaves. I pulled out a notebook and started crunching numbers: hours I'd need to work, loans I'd need to take, scholarships I could still chase. The math was punishing: 60-hour work weeks on top of classes, maybe 5 hours of sleep if I was lucky. As exhaustion pulled me under, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Heard about MIT. Don't sweat it, architecture's the real deal. You'll see Mom and Dad were right someday." Even she'd bought into the family script. I closed my eyes, resolve hardening. I'd prove them wrong with or without them. The hum of my ancient desk fan filled my bedroom as I sat on my lumpy mattress, the MIT acceptance letter still crumpled in my hand from earlier that day. It was late, the Fresno night pressing against my window, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind drifted back through the years, piecing together the puzzle of the Morales household, how I'd always known my place, even if I'd refused to accept it. Growing up, the roles were clear. My father, Javier, was the immigrant success story, a civil engineer whose parents had poured everything into his education. My mother, Rosa, had traded her nursing dreams to raise us and bolster his career, a sacrifice she wielded like a quiet weapon. Then there was Sophia, 3 years older, the golden child who'd claimed her spot early. Sophia had gravitated to architecture like it was her birthright. At 5, she'd doodle houses with crayons while I tore apart old radios, fascinated by their wires and switches. By middle school, she was in junior architect clubs, shadowing Dad at his firm, while I scavenged junkyards for parts to build my first robot. Her science fair wins, pretty models of bridges, earned her framed certificates and steak dinners out. My robotics trophies, earned through sleepless nights of coding and soldering, got a pat on the back and a "That's nice, Lucia." When Sophia got into UC Berkeley's architecture program, Mom threw a party with streamers and a cake. My MIT letter? It sparked a lecture on budgets and practicality. I didn't hate Sophia, not really. She worked hard, her sketches were impressive, and her dream of designing sustainable buildings was real. What gnawed at me was the unspoken rule: her path was the family's pride, Mine was a hobby they humored. The signs had been there, piling up like dust in the corners. 2 years ago, when my laptop died mid-project, I'd mowed lawns and babysat for months to replace it. Sophia's $2,000 drafting software? Dad wrote the check without blinking. Last summer, I'd begged to attend a robotics camp in San Diego. Mom suggested I walk dogs instead. Meanwhile, Sophia jetted off to a Berkeley architecture workshop, fully funded. She needs it for her applications, Dad had said when I dared to ask why. As if MIT's 5% acceptance rate was a cakewalk. I'd ignored those red flags, telling myself that if I just proved my worth, aced my classes, won competitions, landed a top school, they'd see me. The MIT letter was supposed to be my golden ticket, the moment they'd finally cheer as loud for me as they did for Sophia. Instead, it was a mirror reflecting my rank in their eyes. Second string, the backup whose dreams didn't warrant investment. I flipped open my notebook, the numbers from earlier staring back. Hours, loans, exhaustion. My phone buzzed again, Sophia's text glowing, "You'll thank Mom and Dad someday." I tossed it aside, anger simmering. They might not believe in me, but I believed in myself through every salvage circuit and late-night debug. That had to be enough. I traced the MIT logo with my finger, a lifeline in the dark. Tomorrow, I'd start calling scholarship offices, hitting up every opportunity I'd scribbled down during senior year. I'd work weekends at the hardware store, save every dime. The family ecosystem might have Sophia at its apex, but I'd carve my own niche, MIT or bust. As my eyes grew heavy, I whispered to the empty room, "I'll show them." It wasn't just a promise, it was survival. The Fresno sun beat down mercilessly as summer 2026 unfolded, a haze of heat and hustle that blurred the days into one long grind. While my classmates posted beach pics and countdowns to college, I was clocking in at dawn, a triple threat routine I'd stitched together to fund MIT. Mornings started at Brew Haven, the coffee shop downtown, where I slung lattes and dodged cranky regulars until noon. Afternoons, I hauled boxes and rang up customers at Ace Hardware, the air thick with sawdust and motor oil. Evenings, I hunched over my laptop in our stuffy garage, freelancing CD designs for local mechanics, $1.20 a pop, every cent hoarded for Cambridge. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, averaging 4 hours a night, my eyes gritty but fixed on the prize. By July, I'd saved enough for MIT's first semester housing and books, barely. Student loans, a jagged lifeline, covered the rest of tuition after my scholarship. I'd even scored a part-time gig in MIT's engineering lab, starting in September. It was a brutal patchwork, but it meant I was going with or without my parents' help. They watched my marathon with pursed lips, their concern more about appearances than my sanity. "You're pushing too hard, Lucia," Mom said once, stirring pozole in the kitchen. Fresno City's still an option. I just nodded, too tired to argue. The night before I left, they threw a small dinner, tacos and tension on the menu. Sophia, home from Berkeley, dominated the talk with her upcoming studio projects, her professor's genius, her internship lined up. Mom beamed, Dad nodded proudly. My departure for MIT barely registered, a footnote I had to force into the conversation. "My flight's tomorrow at 10, I said, picking at my plate. "Oh right," Mom replied, distracted. "Safe travels, Mija." As we cleared the table, Dad slipped away to his office, returning with an envelope he handed me with a stiff smile. "A little something for expenses," he said. "Wish it could be more." Inside was a $400 check, pocket change against MIT's $80,000 a year price tag. "Thanks," I mumbled, pocketing it. Later, I caught their voices drifting from the kitchen. "I still think we should have given her more," Mom said, her tone soft. "MIT's so expensive." Dad sighed, weary but resolute. "We've been over this, Rosa. Sophia's Berkeley costs are already stretching us." Lucia knew we couldn't swing it. Besides, tech kids get hired straight out of high school. College isn't as critical for her field. "True," Mom conceded. "Sophia's buildings will stand for generations. That's the priority." The words landed like a punch, sharp and final. This wasn't about money, it was about who they'd bet on. Sophia was their legacy. I was the gamble they wouldn't take. Next morning, Dad drove me to the airport, the silence between us heavy as the Central Valley heat. At the terminal he broke it. "We're proud of you, you know. MIT's a big deal." Just not big enough to pay for, I said, voice low. He frowned. That's not fair, Lucia. We've explained. I cut him off with a nod, grabbing my duffel from the trunk. I'll call when I land, I said, his awkward shoulder pat barely registering. And if it gets too tough financially, Fresno State's always there. That was it, their escape hatch for me, their practical fix. I turned away, a vow crystallizing. I wouldn't transfer, wouldn't quit. From now on I'd carry myself, bags, loans, dreams, all of it. The terminal doors slid shut behind me and I didn't look back. The MIT campus in September 2026 was a whirlwind of brick and brilliance, a maze of labs and lecture halls that swallowed me whole. My first semester was a gauntlet I'd built myself. A max course load of mechanical engineering classes, dynamics, thermodynamics, robotics, stacked against a 20-hour week in the engineering lab, tweaking 3D printers and troubleshooting gear. Weekends, I freelanced more CAD designs, my laptop screen a lifeline to extra cash. My dorm room, a concrete box with a single window, smelled perpetually of ramen and stale coffee, my diet reduced to survival rations. Sleep came in snatches, for hours if I was lucky, my brain buzzing with equations and deadlines. I thrived on the chaos though. The lab's hum, the clank of machinery, it was my language, my world. By December I'd made the dean's list, a quiet victory etched in black ink on a list nobody back home would see. Winter break loomed, and while most students bolted for home, I stayed put. The $500 flight to Fresno was a luxury I couldn't justify, not with rent due and books to buy. The dorms emptied out, leaving me one of a handful rattling around the silent halls, my footsteps echoing off the walls. Christmas Day I called home, the line crackling as Mom's voice came through. "We miss you, Mija," she said, warm but distant. Laughter and mariachi music spilled from the background, the Morales family party in full swing. "Miss you too," I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't mention the flight I couldn't afford, the one they hadn't offered to cover. Dad jumped on. "Sophia got straight A's this semester. Her profs say she's a natural. How are your machine classes?" "Mechanical engineering courses, Dad," I corrected, a bite in my tone. "They're good, I made the dean's list." "That's nice," he said, the words flat like I'd aced a spelling test, not one of the toughest programs in the country. Then came the pitch I'd heard before. "This distance is hard on us, Lucia. There's still time to transfer to Fresno State for spring. Live at home, save money." It was their refrain, practicality over ambition, their version of success shrink-wrapped to fit Fresno's borders. "I'm doing well here," I said firmly. "This is where I belong." The conversation veered to Sophia's latest project, their voices brightening, and I let it slide, too drained to fight for airtime. Alone in my room after, I stared at the ceiling, the quiet pressing in. The dean's list certificate sat on my desk, a scrap of proof I was right to stay. But the solitude stung, my family's party echoing in my head, their pride reserved for Sophia's blueprints, not my gears. I'd expected MIT to be hard, but not this lonely. Still I'd chosen this. Every late night, every skipped meal, every no to their transfer please, it was mine. I pulled my hoodie tighter, opened my thermodynamics textbook and dove back in. The work was brutal, but it was my anchor. They could keep their Fresno State safety net. I'd forge my own path here, even if it meant standing alone. The hum of the radiator lulled me forward, my pencil scratching against the page, a rhythm of defiance. Sophomore year at MIT hit like a freight train, the Cambridge chill seeping into my bones by January 2027. I'd layered on another job, research assistant to Professor Eleanor Chin, a legend in robotics whose drones were rewriting disaster response. The gig paid peanuts, barely above minimum wage, but the real currency was her mentorship, a chance to work on cutting-edge autonomous systems. My days stretched longer. Classes, lab shifts, Chen's research sessions, freelance AD gigs. Sleep shrank to 3-hour bursts, my vision blurring over code and schematics. I lived on black coffee and sheer will, my hoodie a second skin, my dorm a revolving door of textbooks and takeout containers. One February night, I nodded off in Chen's lab, my head dipping over a drone navigation algorithm. Her sharp voice snapped me awake. "Miss Morales, when did you last sleep more than 4 hours?" I blinked, brain sluggish. Maybe last Sunday?" Her frown deepened, lines etching her stern face. "This isn't sustainable. Your work stellar, Your last tweak cut our flight error rate by 18%, but you'll collapse at this pace. I hesitated, then let it spill. I don't have a choice. My parents are funding my sister's architecture degree at Berkeley. I'm on my own for MIT. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe pity. Come to my office tomorrow, she said. We need to talk about your role. The next day she offered me a spot on her latest project. A drone swarm for wildfire mapping funded by a hefty grant. The stipend tripled my pay, enough to ditch freelancing on weekends. This isn't a handout, she said, cutting off my protest. You earned it, your error fix saved us weeks. I need that brain of yours sharp, not fried. For the first time in months I exhaled. I could buy groceries, real ones, not just ramen. I could sleep 5 hours, maybe 6. Chen became more than a boss. She was a guide, pushing me to refine my designs, asking questions that stretched my limits. Her belief in me was a lifeline, a tether to something bigger than survival. I called home that night, buzzing from the news. Got a paid research gig with Professor Chen, I said, voice bright. It's on drone swarms, wildfire stuff. Mom's response was tepid. That's nice, dear. Is that stable, though? Sophia just landed a summer internship with a top firm in San Francisco. Practically guarantees her a job after graduation. Dad chimed in, good for you, Lucia, but don't get too comfortable. Research can dry up. The comparison stung, automatic as ever. My win weighed against Sophia's and found lacking. I hung up, the high fading. Chin saw potential in me, why couldn't they? Later I stood in my dorm bathroom staring at the mirror. Dark circles framed my eyes, exhaustion carved into my face despite the lighter load. The voice that had roared, proved them wrong, since freshman year faltered, drowned by their constant shrugs. What if they were right? What if robotics was a pipe dream, and Sophia's steady path was the smart one? The thought clawed at me, colder than the wind rattling my window. But then I saw Chen's notes on my desk, her scribbled, excellent, on my last submission. She believed. I had to keep believing too. I splashed water on my face, grabbed my laptop, and dug back into the swarm code. Doubt could wait, MIT wouldn't. Summer 2028 scorched San Francisco, the Bay Area's fog no match for the heat as I stepped into my junior year triumph. An internship at Horizon Robotics. Professor Chin had connected me with Dr. Amit Kapoor, her former student turned CEO of the startup, whose autonomous delivery bots were popping up on city streets. After reviewing my drone work, he'd offered me the gig, paid enough to quit my lab shifts and freelancing for 3 months. I traded Cambridge's Ivy for Horizon's sleek office, all glass and humming machines, diving into a project on bot navigation for urban warehouses. My days buzzed with brilliant engineers, whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, and the thrill of seeing my code steer bots through mock obstacles. My specific task, a collision avoidance system, caught the exec team's eye when I slashed rerouting times by 25%. On my last day, Dr. Kapoor called me into his office, a corner space overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. We want you full-time after graduation, he said, leaning back in his chair. Your work's exceptional. The salary he quoted, 6 figures plus stock, dwarfed anything I'd dared imagine at 21. For once, the path ahead gleamed clear. No more juggling jobs, just building tech that mattered. I left Horizon elated, the offer a lifeline I'd forged myself. I called my parents that night, voice bubbling. Horizon Robotics offered me a job after I graduate, great pay, real impact. Mom's tone lifted, a rare spark. A job already? Maybe this engineering thing has legs. Dad jumped in, asking about the company, the role, actual questions, not just nods. Tech's blowing up, he said. Good move. Their enthusiasm felt like a win, a crack in their skepticism. But Thanksgiving break back in Fresno shifted the lens. I flew home, my internship savings covering the ticket, eager to share stories. Dinner started warm, chatter about my classes and Horizon, until Sophia dropped her bomb. I got a residency spot at Gensler's LA office, top architecture firm. Mom's eyes welled up, Dad toasted, the proudest Morales moment. My job offer got a polite, that's great, Lucia, then faded as Sophia's news took over, calls to relatives, a special brunch planned. Late that night, I overheard them in the kitchen. We made the right call backing Sophia, Dad said. Gensler's huge. Mom agreed, Lucia's done well though, Surprising with those robots. She's scrappy, Dad chuckled. A solid job even if it's not architecture's prestige. Their laughter sliced deep. My success a fluke, a footnote to Sophia's star. After everything, the sleepless nights, the dean's list, the offer, they still saw me as the long shot who'd lucked out. I sat on my childhood bed, the sting morphing into steel. Their pride wasn't the goal anymore. I didn't need it. Horizon was mine, earned through grit they'd never grasp. Back at MIT, I channeled that clarity into my senior year. Kapoor's offer waited, a beacon beyond graduation. I'd hoped Fresno might shift their view, but it hadn't, and that was fine. Their approval had fueled me once, now it was ash. What burned brighter was my own fire, the certainty I'd build something they couldn't ignore. Not for them, but for me. I packed my bags, the holidays lesson sharp. My worth wasn't theirs to define. Ahead lay circuits and code, a future I'd weld myself. Graduation from MIT in May 2029 felt like shedding a skin. 4 years of ramen, loans, and relentless hustle traded for a diploma and a job at Horizon Robotics. San Francisco welcomed me back with its salty breeze and steep streets, the Horizon office my new proving ground. I threw myself into the work with the same ferocity that had carried me through Cambridge, long hours refining bot algorithms, my desk a chaos of coffee cups and circuit sketches. The collision avoidance system I'd started as an intern became my obsession. I expanded it for cross-city delivery networks, debugging late into the night. Within a year, I'd filed my first patent, a proud scribble of ownership, and presented at a Bay Area tech conference, my voice steady as industry heads nodded. Dr. Amit Kapoor wasn't just a boss, he was a catalyst. He'd push me with questions: what's the next bottleneck? Can this scale globally? And I'd dig deeper, solutions sparking. One foggy morning in 2031, over lukewarm coffee in Horizon's kitchen, he dropped a bomb. Ever thought about starting your own company, Lucia? I laughed, assuming it was a jest. I'm 23, I've barely got my footing here. He didn't smile. You've got more than you think. Your avoidance system's a game changer. It's bigger than what we're doing. You could build something revolutionary. The idea lodged in my brain, a seed I couldn't unplant. Over weeks we talked, entrepreneurship, market gaps, the nuts and bolts of a startup. Kapoor connected me with Professor Chin, who'd cheered the idea from MIT, and soon I was drafting a pitch. AutoSync, an AI-driven logistics platform for autonomous fleets. It'd predict traffic snarls, optimize routes in real time, adapt to chaos. Bots, drones, whatever moved. Kapoor linked me with venture capitalists, his faith a bridge I hadn't expected. Why help me leave? I asked once. He grinned. 20 years ago, Chin did this for me. It's how this valley works. We lift talent up even if it flies. With their nudge, I pitched to a room of suits in June 2031. 2-bit, offering seed funding, enough to quit Horizon and hire a tiny team. I called my parents, half expecting their old refrain of too risky. I'm starting a company, AutoSync, I said, bracing. Mom surprised me. Your own business? That's incredible. Dad chimed in, if it works, you're set, text the future. Their excitement was electric, but a later confession dimmed it. Sophia's struggling at Gensler, Mom admitted. The hours, the pressure, she's doubting it. So that was it. My rise timed with Sophia's wobble, their support a recalibration, not a revelation. It didn't gut me like it once would've. I'd outgrown their scoreboard. AutoSync launched that fall in a cramped Oakland loft. Me and 3 engineers, living on adrenaline and takeout. Every line of code, every pitch was mine to shape. Leaving Horizon's safety net was a leap, but it felt right. My vision, my rules. No more begging for scraps of belief. I'd build my own table. The loft's flickering lights buzzed as we worked late, the hum of possibility louder than doubt. This wasn't just a job, it was a declaration. I'd prove AutoSync's worth, not to them, but to the world I'd always seen beyond Fresno's limits. The Oakland loft where AutoSync took root in late 2031 was a far cry from Horizon's polish. A drafty, converted warehouse with peeling paint and a coffee maker that groaned like it was dying. My team of 4, me 2 coders and a hardware whiz, lived on caffeine and stubborn hope, our desks a tangle of monitors and prototype parts. The mission was ambitious. AutoSync's AI would sync autonomous fleets, bots, drones, trucks, into a seamless logistics web, predicting delays and rerouting on the fly. Early days were brutal. Code crashed, sensors failed, and our seed funding bled out faster than we'd planned. But every snag sparked a fix. By mid-2032, we had a prototype humming and 3 small clients, local delivery outfits, signed on to test it. Success was a slow burn. One client cut delivery times by 15%. Another raved about fuel savings. Word crept out, but money didn't creep in. By early 2033, our bank account was a ghost town, $10,000 left, not enough for payroll, let alone rent. I'd lie awake in my tiny Oakland apartment, numbers spinning. We needed a big win or we'd fold. I prepped a speech for the team, words I dreaded, shutdown loomed like a shadow. Then an email pinged at 2 a.m. Nakamura Logistics, a Japanese shipping giant, wanted a demo. My heart thudded. This could be it or nothing. 2 weeks later, I stood in their San Francisco office, my team beside me, pitching to stone-faced execs in suits. Our prototype ran live, drones dodging mock obstacles, bots rerouting around a traffic jam, and I held my breath. A week of silence followed, then the call. Nakamura would roll AutoSync across their Pacific fleet and lead a $35 million Series B round, valuing us at $250 million. Overnight, we were real. Offices upgraded, staff doubled to 50, clients stacking up from Seattle to Singapore. The grind didn't stop, new bugs, new demands, but it felt electric, every hurdle a step up. I didn't call my parents right away. We talked on holidays, their pride flickering when AutoSync hit local news, but I'd learned to lean on my own compass. By March 2035, I sat in our new San Francisco HQ, a glass tower with a view of the bay, staring at an email that still felt like a dream. Nakamura's deal had closed our Series B, and our client list spanned 3 continents. I'd gone from Fresno's spare kid to CEO of a tech darling, 26 and unapologetic. The receptionist buzzed, "Miss Morales, your parents are here." I hadn't invited them. Curious, I told her to send them up. They stepped into my office, eyes wide at the sleek desks, the awards, Best Startup 2034, patents framed like art. Mom hugged me, Dad clutched a Chronicle clipping about our funding. "We saw it in the paper," he said. $35 million. Why didn't you tell us?" "Been busy," I shrugged, gesturing to chairs. Their awe was palpable, but I'd built this without their map. The loft days, the near collapse, Nakamura's save, it was mine, forged in sweat and sleepless nights. They'd come now, dazzled by headlines, but I'd stopped needing their spotlight. AutoSync wasn't their victory, it was my proof, a signal flared to the girl they doubted. I leaned back, ready for whatever they'd say, my footing solid at last. The San Francisco skyline glittered through my office's floor-to-ceiling windows as my parents settled into the leather chairs across from my desk in March 2035. Mom's eyes darted over the sleek space, the bay view, the AutoSync logo etched in glass, while Dad fidgeted with the Chronicle article, its headline screaming, "AutoSync secures $35 million, valued at $250 million. Their surprise visit wasn't just a drop-in, I could smell the agenda. "We're so proud," Mom gushed, her voice a shade too bright. "Your own company, look at this place." Dad nodded, clearing his throat. "We always knew you had something special, Lucia. That MIT grit paid off." I smiled, polite but guarded. "Thanks. It's been a ride." Then it came. Dad leaned forward, tentative. "We've been thinking about retirement. Opportunities like this don't come often. Any room for family to invest in AutoSync?" There was the real pitch. Not pride, but a stake in the success they'd never bankrolled. I stood, gesturing them to follow. "Let me show you something." We walked down a hallway lined with framed milestones, my voice steady as I narrated. First stop, my MIT acceptance letter beside a cracked coffee mug, a relic of those ramen days. This is where it started, 3 jobs, 4 hours of sleep, scraping by. Next, a blueprint of my first bot design, rejection emails from early VCs pinned beside it. Every no was a fight. We pitched in a warehouse, barely eating, until Nakamura saw what others didn't. We paused at photos of my original team, 4 of us, bleary-eyed in Oakland, then the Nakamura contract, a cornerstone of our rise. "These are the believers who got us here," I said, when AutoSync was a risk nobody wanted. Dad's jaw tightened, Mom shifted uncomfortably. I stopped at the final frame, A brochure for the AutoSync Foundation funding 15 STEM students yearly, kids like me full of drive but short on support. That's my investment now, I said. Kids told their dreams aren't worth it. They stared silent. Dad tried again. We're family, Lucia, doesn't that count? It does, I replied, soft but firm. That's why I built this foundation. You taught me what it's like to need belief, and not get it. I'm giving it to them instead. Their faces fell, the weight landing. We don't need family investors, I added. But those students do. That's the legacy I'm after. They nodded, subdued, and left with quiet goodbyes, the article limp in Dad's hand. I watched them go, no anger left, just clarity. Back at my desk, emails pinged, new clients, next steps. AutoSync's hum filled the air, my team's chatter a steady pulse. This wasn't revenge, it was release. 10 years ago, they dismissed my MIT letter as a long shot. Now, I ran a company they couldn't ignore, not because they'd finally see me but because I'd seen myself all along. The foundation was my mirror, reflecting the girl who'd fought alone and won. I opened a report on our latest fleet sync, numbers dancing across the screen. The future wasn't theirs to claim, it was mine to build, one algorithm, one kid, one unshakable choice at a time.